Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Happy Easter to all of you. Hope you're getting ready for a wonderful weekend as you celebrate with family and friends. We're also getting ready for a bit of a getaway day for us. DawgNation Cruise begins on Monday. Wish all of you could be there. We are going to have some great stuff, though, planned for you while I am and many of our DawgNation colleagues are gone. We'll tell you more about that over the course of our time together. Busy show. Before we kind of pop into it, let's also say hello to some of you and kind of find out how things are going here today. Obviously, a lot in the transfer portal. We are watching that very closely. More information out there that can be confirmed about who is visiting Georgia over the course of this weekend. Certainly seems like Georgia's really targeting some pretty big defensive names. Some very interesting prospects. We are going to touch on more of that. Bill Camacho, good morning to you. UGA Marine in here. Garrison Tucker's in here. Everybody getting ready for a lot of fun. We will take some comments at the end of the show, but obviously we are just sort of jam-packed today, kind of getting ready for a big DawgNation cruise. I will have to confess that. So we got a lot of fun, a lot to do. It includes Jeff Sentell. It includes all of you and the latest in the transfer portal. Also, let's just fire up the animation. We'll tell you everything we're about to do here today. Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Hope you're getting ready for a great Easter weekend. Obviously, Kroger, a big part of our Easter weekend every single year, this year being no different. It's also an interesting day for us in that next week begins our DawgNation cruise. Really one of the proudest weeks I have a chance to be a part of. Here, hundreds of you are on board with us. I wish it could be all of you here with us, but I've always loved the fact that DawgNation is, and I use this phrase a lot, kind of three-dimensional. It's more than just sort of a flat thing. It's not just stories and podcasts and videos, but it's connection and community, and I'm really proud of that. And our chat here live is a reflection of that. Our interaction on social media is a reflection of that. And when we can get together in person, that's certainly a reflection of that, too. Our DawgNation cruise, a big part of all of that. But prior to that, we are still in game mode here, game face mode, I mean to say. A lot to cover. We have got recruiting news with Jeff Sentell. We have got the latest transfer information as it relates to Georgia in terms of who is perhaps set to visit Georgia and what that maybe means. We're going to give you information related to that here on the show today. And to kick things off, maybe a little bit of a surprise as it relates to a guy that one national outlet says might be Georgia's most important player. Now, just because it's surprising doesn't mean that we don't agree. Very, very important, but maybe most important overall. We'll let you debate that. What do you say we start that way? We'll get it cranked up. We'll get it going, and we'll have a lot of fun. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Great week coming up for us next week. We're going to be on our DawgNation cruise. We are getting ready for a lot of fun on that. I'll tell you more about how that's going to impact you, the DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger viewer and listener. That comes up a little later on. And we got all kinds of transfer stuff, like more information about a couple of guys who are leaving Georgia, a lot of information about who's on their way to perhaps visit Georgia. Georgia targeting some pretty intriguing prospects. We gave you Bo Atkinson yesterday. We can give you more information out there today about who else is also there. So we're going to cover all of that with you, and really looking forward to doing that. Let me begin with this, though. We're always interested in what the national media says about Georgia. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't. But universally, we've just believed that there is value in the perspective kind of outside the boundaries of DawgNation, our little bubble here, our little corner of the world. What people are saying beyond that sometimes is interesting because their perspective is just different than ours, and it gives us just something sort of different to consider when it comes to the topic that we obsess over each and every day. Perhaps an example of this here today, where CBS Sports, looking at its preseason top 25, has listed an MVP for each of its top 25 teams. And the name that was selected for Georgia, I have to say, is a little bit surprising. Now, I don't mean this in a negative way. I just mean that this is probably not what I would have put if I was going to make this list myself. And yet at the same time, there is, I believe, incredible value when it comes to this particular player. Let me just read you what CBS had to say, and then we'll kind of get into a conversation here. The name tapped by CBS is transfer wide receiver Noah Thomas, who obviously comes to Georgia via Texas A&M. What CBS writes is this spot could go to whatever edge rusher Georgia adds to the transfer portal. More on that in a moment. They go on to say, whichever one already on the roster steps up, the Bulldogs have a significant need there defensively, meaning edge rushing spot. By the way, we noticed that our friends at CBS do not capitalize all the letters in edge the way that I guess our folks at On3 are doing. So interesting stylistic choice there. Anyway, CBS says the offense for Georgia was limited last season by some lackluster wide receiver play. Georgia didn't have a reliable option for former quarterback Carson Beck, and drops were a real issue. Boy, were they. The 6'6" Thomas should shore things up. He'll be a reliable target for new starter Gunnar Stockton with his sure hands and his immense catch radius. First of all, I like sure hands. I love immense catch radius. That is one of those things that would, I think, lead you to believe that Thomas is a very important player. Now, is he the most important player in the Georgia roster? Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about next week, and I love this, about once or twice a year, we'll kind of get together and do sort of a DawgNation roundtable style show. Next week, we're going to do that. And the point that I'm going to make on one of those shows is I think it's entirely possible that Georgia's most important player offensively is not Gunnar Stockton. We were actually talking about that independent of this particular topic. So as kind of a lead-in to what we'll discuss more next week, I think it's entirely possible that Georgia's most important offensive player is not Gunnar Stockton, even though quarterback is the most important position in football and arguably the most important position in team sports anywhere. You know, the very best teams in college football as of late, the very best teams from Georgia as of late, have not necessarily had quarterback as the most important player. A very good version of Georgia in 2025 might be the same way once again. Our buddy Randy Hall, watching at DawgNation.com, I had just happened to look down and see our chat. He says, I think it's going to be Nate Frazier as Georgia's MVP. So you can kind of squabble with, like, who is the actual MVP for Georgia. Maybe you do think it's Stockton, or maybe you agree with Randy and you think it's Nate Frazier, or maybe you think it's somebody else we haven't mentioned yet. There's some sort of room to discuss that. I think it's somewhat surprising that CBS chose Thomas here. But once you move past the kind of bolder proclamation of most valuable, most important player, once you kind of move past that descriptor, we would all agree, I believe, that Thomas is an incredibly important player. No matter where you rank him in Georgia's overall value and his overall importance, we can at least agree that he is potentially very important and potentially very valuable. That this was a significant add for Georgia out of the transfer portal. And if you want to go back a couple of weeks ago, it was during spring break week. Some of you may have missed it. Noah Thomas met with the media that particular week, and it was universally celebrated, and rightly so, when Thomas chose Georgia. And when he spoke to reporters a couple of weeks ago, he did sort of speak about why UGA was the right choice for him.
Georgia's a prestigious school. Coach Coley used to coach me over at Texas A&M, so great relationship with him, great dude, real genuine, and just all about Georgia is everything that I want and everything that I was looking for at the time.
So connected previous to James Coley. Coley is a very good recruiter. You know, I would say that, and we've kind of been down the show before, we didn't love James Coley's Georgia offensive coordinator in 2019, but boy, when it comes to being kind of the expert talent acquirer as a position coach, as an assistant coach, James Coley has always been really good at that. And, you know, that was true in his sort of previous iteration at Georgia. And already as Georgia's wide receivers coach here right now, boy, has Georgia ever acquired over the course of a 12-month span as much talent as it has seemingly acquired here this year at a high school and a couple of really good transfers, which is kind of funny because anytime we mention Noah Thomas, it always seems to also come up bringing in Zachariah Branch too. These two receivers kind of always mentioned side by side together, very different kinds of players, also coming from two very different programs. But mentioned in the same sentence almost always because of their kind of, I guess, twin pillars of opportunity to really make a positive impact on the Georgia offense. And by the way, Thomas himself here is no different. Not only when we talk about Thomas, we talk about Branch, but when Thomas spoke to reporters, he also talked about Zachariah Branch too. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why we would say, well, Thomas is really important to Georgia. He has the potential of being really valuable to Georgia, but maybe not most valuable player on the team, because it's not even obvious that he'll necessarily be more valuable to Georgia than the other transfer receiver Georgia brought in, Zachariah Branch. And with that in mind, this is what Thomas said about Branch a couple of weeks ago.
Man, Zach, my dog. As soon as we got here, it was straight work. Like every chance we got that we were just chilling on the weekends, we had the facility putting in extra work. Love how he works, man. He made me more. He influenced me to work more. He's a baller too. So just like I said, learning from him too as well. Different releases, different stems, stuff like that, and just helping each other out, and then learning the playbook as well. It's coming great. Yeah.
So Zachariah Branch, Noah Thomas says, is a baller. We believe, to use that phrase, Thomas could be a baller too, and we believe that eventually Georgia could be very happy to have both of these transfer wide receivers in the fold for this upcoming season. And when we're kind of throwing around descriptors, things like that, Thomas describing Branch as a baller. Do you remember the clip we played for you the other day of what K.J. Bolden once said about both Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas? One of the reasons why, the debate about Georgia's most impactful newcomer or most valuable player offensively, the reason why that debate could be intense is because in the case of Branch and Thomas, they both have reasons to like them. They both have reasons to respect the value they could bring to Georgia. We love the way that K.J. Bolden, who battles these guys during practice, said the other day, hey, listen, these guys are monsters right now. It was a fun quote from Bolden. Let's revisit it right now.
Oh, yeah, them guys are monsters, man. Zach, I got to guard Zach every day. So, we're going at it every down. But Zach is definitely a great player. He go 110 every day. He's going to try to give you his best. You feel me? And then same with Noah. Noah, just a big guy, big tall receiver. You love those type of guys. He kind of remind me of Kobe. It's just him and Kobe lineups on the side. It just looked different. But they both got here. They had to get used to it, the program. We kind of do things different here at Georgia. But I feel like they kind of have bought in to what we're doing, and them guys gonna have a great season.
So it's good to have Colby Young back at Georgia, and to listen to K.J. Bolden speak, it's good to have another player who kind of reminds you of Colby Young here too. In the case of Noah Thomas, I think that's all really fun. And once again, on the theme of the transfer additions and how valuable they may prove to be for Georgia at the wide receiver position here this year, let's also go back to the beginning of spring and hearing a little bit more from Kirby Smart on that about what he liked about both those guys and why it was that he wanted to bring them to Georgia. This is Kirby Smart on both Branch and Thomas.
Yeah, I'm excited about both those guys. Both really good players. Both have been successful in their organizations where they've been. They're both talented pass catchers, which seems to be the largest, turnover position there is. Outside of quarterback, there's only one. That's the one that has the most transfer at its position. Receivers probably next. And both those guys they're high caliber athletes, but they're high caliber people. And I've enjoyed working with them. The Branch brothers have been a great kind of injection into our off-season energy and workouts. They love working out. Their father trains guys. They love training. So the culture and work ethic that it requires to be successful here, they've jumped right in and done a great job of that. Noah has too. He's played in the SEC. He's been successful. So, we still got to go out and do it on the field. But I'm excited about who they are.
Can't forget that last part. Obviously, no matter what projections are being thrown around, whether it's from me or a national writer for a big website or anything like that, hey, you still got to go out there and do it on the field. But it's kind of nice to hear these things being said about one of the transfer receivers that Georgia brought in. And to sort of sum all this up and kind of bring it to a conclusion, ultimately, we may have our own differing opinions of who Georgia's likely most valuable player will be. Maybe it'll prove to be Thomas. Maybe it won't be. I will tell you, the buzz about him has been really strong really throughout the entire time he's been at Georgia. So maybe it does end up being him. We don't really know about that. But it is almost universally agreed upon that he will, in all likelihood, have a lot of value to Georgia. along with Zachariah Branch, too, and some of the freshmen that Georgia's brought in, and a lot of these new faces that are being really leaned on to provide the needed offensive improvement that Georgia sort of has to have. And here is like the one thing that I think that we should all take some comfort in, and one of the reasons why over the course of the last few weeks, sort of an optimism about Georgia has been a kind of a general theme for us. Look, you've maybe heard it said in life before that if nothing changes, nothing changes. And for Georgia, things have changed. Now, in some respects, it wasn't the change that some people wanted. They wanted this coach to be different or whatever else. I get all of that. That's a conversation that we've now had plenty of times. But to those other folks who you may see in a chat or you may see on social media or something like that who say, why would I expect anything to be different with the Georgia offense this year? That's not a rhetorical question. That is a question that deserves an answer. Why would we expect things to be different, better for the Georgia offense in 2025 compared to what it was in 2024? I think the very legitimate answer to that question is because Georgia has brought in some very interesting players. We think what's going to happen the next few weeks, or I should say the next few days of the transfer portal right now, is mostly going to be on defense, although I guess there's some chance the offense kind of gets involved here a little bit too. But what they did in the previous portal, when you bring in a guy like Noah Thomas, it makes your team better in all likelihood. When you bring in a guy like Zachariah Branch, that makes your team better in all likelihood. When you bring in a C.J. Wiley and a Talon Taylor and a Landon Roldan and some of these other freshmen, Ethan Barbour at the tight end position, Elias Williams maybe even, that has the potential to make your offense better. So the reason why we think it can be different and improvement can be shown in 2025 is that Georgia, we believe, has gone out and put together a massive talent upgrade. So much so that CBS Sports is talking about the value that Noah Thomas could bring to the Georgia offense. I think that makes the conversation about how things could look in 2025 an awful lot of fun. And that's a conversation we look forward to having with all of you throughout the summer. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Final live show we'll do with you for a few days. Next week, as you know, is our DawgNation Cruise. But before we get to that and tell you everything we're going to be doing here, let's also remind you that this weekend's also Easter. Big time here. Obviously, a time of year that we love, and we love celebrating it with our family and friends, appreciating this day, this time of year. And as you're getting stocked up and ready to go for your own Easter celebration, keep your friends at Kroger in mind on all of that, whether it's the candy for the Easter baskets maybe, or sometimes the people like to put the little candy in the little eggs. When I was a kid, we always did like the real eggs. You dye them, you have that vinegary smell in your house. Now it seems like plastic eggs have sort of taken over. And a lot of people kind of put the candy inside the eggs. You know what I'm talking about. Some people put money in there too, I guess. That's for the fancy folks. Either way, Kroger's got you covered on that. The great food on your plate for the delicious meal, everything else. You can get all of that at your local Kroger. In fact, check out the website, Kroger.com/Easter for more on that. Kroger.com/Easter. They will get you ready for all of that. It's going to be a great Easter. We are so excited about that for sure. And as I said, we're also excited about our DawgNation Cruise as well. Let me give you a little bit of a heads up on that. So about once or twice a year, I think I've mentioned this, about once or twice a year, we like to kind of get together and do what we call a DawgNation roundtable. So we get a lot of voices that we hear from on DawgNation throughout the week. We're going to take some people that you kind of hear from a lot, our Mike Griffith, our Jeff Sentell, our Connor Riley, the sort of three writers, I guess you might think of. We're going to do sort of a writers roundtable on DawgNation Daily next week. And it's going to be the main crux of the show. So it's not going to be quite so much a normal show. It's really intended to be something completely different. So when we do this, the feedback on it's generally pretty good. And I'll talk more about this next week when we do the show. But like last year when we did this during the same kind of time of year, one of the big takeaways I got from just hearing people speak turned out to be true. And so I think there's some actual football value to come out of all of this. So that's going to be next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. the main crux of the show, there'll be a little bit of me off the top sort of setting up the roundtable, but really the main content is going to be me throwing out a topic and Mike and Jeff and Connor and me all kind of kicking it around. A very different format than a normal edition of DawgNation Daily. We're looking forward to doing that with you next week. And then on Friday, we will be live. Connor Riley's going to host in this spot on video that day, recapping whatever happens with the NFL draft. Obviously, we're expecting 3 dogs to be taken in the first round. Certainly hopeful for that. We believe it's going to probably be the case. So Connor will be talking about where they go, other draft surprises, sort of the big takeaways as the first round kind of concludes there on that Thursday night. It's also the final line of our DawgNation cruise. Always one of the biggest events of all is our draft party. So I'm really looking forward to all of that, both with you on Utopia of the Seas next week, for those of you that will be there, and on video with Connor on Friday. And, of course, as transfer news, both someone may be leaving Georgia or maybe someone coming to Georgia, as that pops up when necessary, we'll also go live on video next week as that becomes appropriate. We're not going to, DawgNation itself is not going to shortchange you with coverage. Obviously, next week continues to be a very busy week, but it does coincide with our DawgNation cruise. So some of us will be in the Caribbean next week, but Connor will be back here, and he'll be covering a lot of that ground, and I certainly appreciate him doing it. I've made the same joke 8 million times, but he's sort of like our designated survivor, if you know what that is. There's always a member of the president's cabinet that can't be at, like, the State of the Union, because if something were to happen, they got to sort of run the government. Connor's sort of our DawgNation designated survivor next week, and we appreciate him doing that. I also appreciate Jeff Sentell. We're going to get him in a moment. But prior to that, let's go around the DawgHouse presented by Zagoria Law. Now, we're about to get knee-deep into all of the transfer rumors that can be kind of confirmed as of press time, as of time of recording. We're going to kind of give you everything that we know for sure. We'll let Jeff Sentell add some to this here in a moment. But it's obviously getting pretty busy here right now. We already know that Branson Robinson's leaving Georgia. Found out yesterday that Nitro Tuggle's going to, officially transfer. Marcus Easley going to officially transfer. Perhaps neither one of those all that surprising. But let's talk for a moment about who might be coming into Georgia here. We told you yesterday about an edge rushing, almost kind of defensive end type guy, I guess you'd say, in Bo Atkinson from North Carolina. I think that's a really intriguing prospect. I think he's slated to visit Georgia. But there's also a chance that Georgia, has such a need at the sort of edge position, they may be actually seeking more than one. So Atkinson's a name that some people kind of feel like they know because he was playing at a pretty high level for a Power 4 school a year ago at North Carolina. There's also maybe a less famous name that's sort of out there right now. We talked about Elo Oduzi from Army here. I should say Moduzi. Elo Moduzi from Army, who is going to also visit Georgia. He's 6'3". He's 245 pounds. He's going to be here over the course of the weekend. And as our friends from On 3, Hayes Fawcett here describes, one of the top players available in the transfer portal. Now, let's dive in on that a little bit more, specifically here for a moment, because not only is the big national website On 3 touting a guy that, I'll be honest with you, is not famous to me at all. By the way, how much do you love those Army uniforms? I do think those are really cool, if you're watching on video. But the point is, Elo Moduzi, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on things related to Elo Moduzi because I am certainly not. But it is interesting to watch as he's been in the portal, how much buzz has been generated about him, both there from On 3. But let's go to one of their competitors, 24/7 Sports here for a moment. There's a guy named Cooper Patagna. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I may be pronouncing his name incorrectly. They were doing a video thing the other day about some of the top players available in the transfer portal. And for like 2 minutes, Patagna from 24/7 also went on this big, long rant about how impressed he was with a guy like Elo Moduzi. In fact, let me just play. This is like 30 seconds of audio. It's pretty short. The entire clip was much longer than that, but really pretty impressed with Moduzi here, the Army transfer. This is what Cooper Patagna from 24/7 Sports had said about that.
He entered the portal. You made him a top 50 prospect, a top 10 edge prospect. What do you like so much about him?
We thought about going higher, too.
Say it with your chest, Coop.
This is a kid late last night that I'm watching these names kind of filtering in, and our database team at 24/7 does a tremendous job getting these guys in and us turning around and getting them graded. And here's this kid from West Point Academy, it's the last guy that I watched of the night. And, this is a guy that edge rusher, sophomore, dynamic background, holds his school record in the long jump at 23 feet out of high school. The reason I bring that up, and Smoke knows this as well, but when you talk about these field events in track and field, especially the high jump, the triple jump, the long jump, it's an indicator of explosive power, especially in the lower half. And when you see a guy like Elo Meduzzi, who out of high school was 195 pounds, now playing upwards of 240, the lower body explosiveness is not only important for his first step off the line of scrimmage, but it shows up in the hands.
So I think it's all really interesting. The point of the clip is that here's a scout-type guy from 24/7 really raving about Elo Meduzzi, a player that's set to visit Georgia that would not have been all that famous to us prior to this, but maybe sort of worth paying attention to. The one thing I have heard some Georgia fans say is, well, it's not the biggest guy in the world at 245 pounds, clearly more of an outside linebacker than a defensive end. Not the biggest guy here, but as the guy from 24/7 just said, hey, listen, less than 200 pounds coming out of high school, but major league athleticism, big leaping factor, big athleticism, now adding weight while in college. It sounds like this is a pretty fast rising guy here. Does he end up at Georgia? I don't know. Does Bo Atkinson end up at Georgia? I don't know. I know Atkinson's visiting Ohio State. There's also a ton of buzz about Atkinson maybe even going to South Carolina to play opposite Dylan Stewart, if that's a real thing. There is at least some rumor, mongering about that right now. Could Georgia get both Meduzzi and Atkinson? I don't know. They're very different players. They would clearly, help kind of meet a need for Georgia, especially as Gabe Harris is working back to full health and things like that. My only point here is he is going to visit Georgia, and according to the big, sort of national websites here and their scouts, this is perhaps a name to know. Now, let me give you another name, different position, that also seems to have a little buzz around Georgia right now. There's a guy named Cedric Smith who comes from Alabama A&M. I'll show you this on the screen. Pete Nakos, fresh off battling with Tennessee fans over the Nico Iamaleava situation, says that Alabama A&M defensive lineman Cedric Smith will visit Georgia. His agency tells me and Steve Wiltfong, to use bad grammar, we live in a world now where an Alabama A&M defensive lineman has an agent. But nonetheless, he's 6'4", he's 280 pounds. He had 20 tackles and a sack as a true freshman. It sounds like Georgia here, and in fact, there's even, from the other national site 24/7, there's even some online predictions that Georgia will get Cedric Smith. Honestly, I can't tell you much about him at all, other than if Georgia likes him, there must be a reason. But beyond that, I can't tell you much here. But perhaps the recent chatter about Georgia and the young man here from Alabama A&M could be complicated by the fact that Georgia is now also seemingly in the mix for another defensive lineman that's got a little bit more of a power 4, vibe to him. Let me also show you this. Miami transfer Joshua Horton is going to visit Georgia too. Now, he's 6'5", 295 pounds, a little bigger. Played 8 games a year ago with the Hurricanes. Once again, Hayes Fawcett bringing in a lot of this. So there you have it. You got, Georgia hosting the edge rusher from Army, Bo Atkins from North Carolina in the mix for a guy that seems to be, kind of a prospect on the rise out of Alabama A&M. And we live in a world now where if you flash it all at the FCS level, the HBCU level, the Group of 5 level, and you've got kind of the requisite size, you are not staying at that level very long. There is a huge talent drain from the lower levels of the sport up towards the top. Cedric Smith is going to be the latest example of that, whether he ends up at Georgia or somewhere else. Now you got Joshua Horton apparently visiting Georgia too. I don't know if that complicates things for Cedric Smith and what might happen for him at Georgia. I don't know where any of this is going, but that's at least, and by the time you hear this show, there'll probably be more. There could be anyway. That's at least 4 defensive names that Georgia, according to reports, set to host for visits, and perhaps a couple of them could land here at UGA. Main takeaway, as we've said it now for a couple of days, especially when it comes to, the Army guy and Atkinson, that Georgia really set its sights on, kind of adding some experience to the edge position, outside linebacker, defensive end. And the early actions in the transfer portal suggest what a need that truly is. And that is Around the DawgHouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, the law is complicated. We know that. And personal injury law is at times particularly complicated. And so one of the things we like is when someone says, okay, for what can be a really complicated topic, let's become experts by narrowing our focus and really zeroing in on a specific aspect of personal injury law. That's what our friends at Zagoria Law do. You perhaps see in the news all the time, they're terribly tragic stories of dog attacks. Oftentimes these involve children, which is scary and really horrible. It's a very serious thing. It seems like there are more and more of these stories in the news all the time. If you or someone you know, someone you love has been victimized by a dog attack, whether it be a dog bite or just an injury caused by a dog, our friends at Zagoria Law want to help you get the compensation you deserve. Because, look, this is no different than any other personal injury situation. If a dog owner has acted negligently, that's created, perhaps some pain and suffering from you, some medical bills for you. That's created that situation for you, and you deserve your chance to have your say in court to get what you feel you deserve. And that's what our friends at Zagoria Law want to help fight with you for. They are the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. They literally wrote the book on how to win these types of cases. So I want you to find them online. It's ZagoriaLaw.com. It's ZAGORIA, ZagoriaLaw.com for more on that. You can also give them a call, 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's 833-GA-DOG-BITE. In this case, dog spelled conventionally D-O-G. Zagoria Law, great to have them as a part of Around the DawgHouse here today. It's great to have all of you on the show today, too. Before we're done, we're going to look a little bit more closely at Ryan Puglisi and one of the reasons why, even though he's not likely to be Georgia's starting quarterback this fall, a lot of positive buzz about Puglisi after spring practice. We'll give you more of that. We'll also give you some of the other transfer news taking place around college football, all of that to come. But for now, on everything going on, both with recruiting and also maybe who Georgia might be hosting from a portal standpoint this weekend, let's talk about that here with Jeff Sentell today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Jeff Sentell here. Jeff, I said this one of these days, I think it may have been yesterday, that sometimes it's comforting to see things play out that you kind of expected to play out because, college football provides so many surprises. Weird things are happening all the time. So when you do have something take place that's kind of what I thought. There's just a little bit of comfort to that. And I would say the early actions for Georgia in the transfer portal, an example of that. Now, before yesterday, I've never really heard of Elo Maduzzi from Army. He's not well known to me, but he is an edge defender. Bo Atkinson, perhaps a little bit more well known, probably North Carolina's best defensive player a year ago, but another sort of edge type guy that Georgia's going after. The point here is that we expected Georgia to target these defensive type guys that could play on the edge of the defense. And at least thus far, in the case of Maduzzi and Atkinson, that seems to be exactly what Georgia's doing.
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, good morning. Happy Friday to everybody. It is that time of year, Brandon. You don't really need to be a sleuther or a rocket scientist to kind of figure out what the needs were. I mean, you look at Michael Williams, you look at Chaz Chambliss, you look at Jalen Walker. There's a lot of guys that Georgia lost that played that edge position. And I think it's so intricate that I think Georgia is looking for a guy that can be your traditional edge setter, which is, I guess, is what Chambliss did, stop the run. And then you're also looking for a guy that can also rush the passer, which is what more Michael did, maybe more of what Jalen Walker did. And it's really just the one spot at Georgia, especially defensively, that it looks to me like they're very thin. And they're very thin. They were supremely thin, my man, during spring because they were without Gabe Harris, and they were without, at some points, Quintavious Johnson as well. So they got pretty thin there. I think Georgia's front seven is going to be a major strength. And I think Gabe Harris is going to have a war daddy type year, Brandon, to use that vernacular in the scouting world. And I think he's ready to go. I think he has shown Georgia a lot of good stuff, just needs to stay healthy. And I feel like what Georgia's doing now is trying to find insurance policies, but also just really key core depth with what you can have there. I really, of all those guys, Brandon, I did scoop the film. Two names that stand out to me is I think Joshua Horton is intriguing because he was at Langston Hughes. I don't know if you remember that, Brandon. He was on the state championship team in 2022. About 6'4"-ish, about 275, a little bit more than that now. He has Power 4 experience. He's one of those veteran bodies, more that 20, 21, 22-year-old that Georgia likes to hang out in a grown man league. And I also really like the Army transfer portal candidate, Brandon. When you can have 6.5 sacks and make as many plays as he did, including on special teams like blocking kicks and stuff like that, and you can do that at Army, and you can have that type of size, 6.5 sacks, Brandon, that's pretty good, man. And at Army, they're not churning out pass rushers. So if they had anybody that was a threat, then every offense that they saw tried to counter him.
It's also a different age in which, in the past, we would not have thought of Army players as transfer candidates really at all. These are guys that go on to military service and in some cases become, major world leaders in some cases. So it's a little bit different to think about an Army player perhaps transferring. But it's also, as I said before, when you look at kind of the big national analyst type, recruiting type, major websites, really you got, both On3 and 24/7 kind of raving about this guy. Now, maybe that's just a really effective PR campaign. Sometimes that is what some of this ends up being. But in other cases, it's also meant to be taken genuinely at face value, that this is a player ready to kind of break out of just a service academy type guy, just a sort of group of five type guy, that he's kind of ready to maybe be more than that.
I think you see a lot, Brandon. It's just top of the scarcity at that position. I mean, immediately it's like if you're an offensive tackle, Brandon, and you came out and you basically got your jersey dirty 3 times and got some grass stains a couple of times, you're immediately a top 10 tackle because those guys don't come out. I think I saw that with Virginia's tackle who, was he a world beater? Probably not, but I think he quickly rose to like the number 3 offensive tackle in the portal. I think this Army guy here is definitely part of that, where, Brendan, you see all these things on the internet. You see all these posts on social media about there's already 1,000 people that have been in the portal. I'd be willing to bet, Brandon, maybe your favorite drink on Coco K, that most of those 30-40% are probably going to be corners, running backs, and wide receivers, the skills guys.
Perhaps that's the case. Going back to Bo Atkinson here for a moment from North Carolina, we've immediately heard about Ohio State potentially being the mix for him. There's been some other chatter about some other SEC teams here too. Do you take it as a positive that in the immediate impact of him going to the portal, the fact that we heard really right away about when he'd be visiting Georgia, the fact that, Georgia seemed to sort of strike very fast on that. Do you think that gives Georgia any kind of leg up here, that while other schools are undoubtedly in the mix, Georgia is acting as quickly right now as anybody on him?
I feel like it's an example of the young man wanting to win quickly. Brandon, let's just do the humanity test right now. Well, first of all, it's a side note that there's a young man that Georgia's recruiting named Atkinson right now, and it's not Tyler out of Grayson. But the thing that comes to my mind immediately, Brandon, I don't know if you can say the same, is that why is he leaving Belichick? And that's a guy that's a defensive guy, development. We know North Carolina is going to have some currency to spend for Atkinson and also Belichick's first team because they want that to go smashingly well. But the graphic kind of there tells a lot. You're looking at Ohio State and Georgia. I was told that that's an example where the young man wants to win and wants to win now and wants to go to one of those power programs and not wait for the Bill Belichick build right there. And 11 sacks through 2 seasons in the ACC. You do that translation. What's the exchange rate of that to the SEC? Maybe that's 6-7 sacks in the SEC, but still, Brandon, they're just trying to replace so many snaps at that edge of that defensive end position that Georgia is in a buyer's market for that.
Do you know, and it's okay if you don't, do you know anything about Cedric Smith, the name out of Alabama A&M? I guess he went to South Atlanta High School. I will totally confess to not knowing him as a prospect at all, or really what a potential fit would be at Georgia. I get the impression it would be more of a long-term type thing as opposed to like an immediate impact situation. So, this would feel to be more of a long-term play than what a guy like Atkinson might be. But do you know anything about Cedric Smith? Because there are some people who've even predicted Georgia to land Smith, not just visiting, but this being, a player out of Alabama and A&M that might actually end up at Georgia.
Brandon, your instincts serve you well. That's a long-term play there. Did hear a little bit about him when he was coming out. He was out of South Carolina. It's kind of funny, Brandon, in the world we live in, that you can have a guy with 20 tackles and a sack and have an agency representing a guy at Alabama A&M. I don't like the fact that he only had that much production, and he's not really, size plus here. He would just be an average body or even an undersized body on Georgia's defensive line. You would like to have seen him have a lot more production at Alabama A&M, but I feel like this situation is an example where he wants to get closer to home. He wants to play among the best and with the best. And certainly, I got to tell you, if the QC Sports can get him from Alabama and A&M to Georgia off just 20 tackles and a sack, they must be doing something right.
Yeah, maybe that's the case. And once again, when it comes to things that are difficult to know, I know that by the time the season kicks off, Georgia's roster cannot be, at least we think it's going to be the case, where Georgia's roster cannot exceed 105 players. Do we have any idea how many players Georgia can bring in right now? Is this just one of those things of they're going to do what they're going to do and figure it out after the fact? Is there any kind of assumption of, we've seen 3 transfer players leave, but based on my sort of back-of-the-napkin math, they probably need to lose, maybe a number similar to that. Is there any kind of working theory on what kind of space Georgia has to add here? Because they have certainly, hosted, at least, by published reports, at least 4 players, and there could be more coming. How much room does Georgia have to add here? Do we have any idea?
I think I've been led to believe, maybe a little bit more than back of the napkin math, that I think the number Georgia operates at around annually is about 120 to 130 players in the program. So you're looking at 25 of those walk-ons that have to go, much less a lot of these guys that are, Georgia's preferred walk-ons or those guys that are not likely to play. I think that it's one thing where Georgia is going to be very pinpointed, Brandon. You see them bringing in a lot of players already, and that pace kind of gets you thinking that this is going to be a little bit up tempo, but they're really trying to do it at really one specific spot. That's the defensive end spot. And they're also going to try and get, like the young man from South Atlanta, from Alabama and we just spoke about, someone with traits, someone with size, someone with twitch, someone with the ability to get off the ball really quickly that Georgia can mold and make into a better player. I think the thing Georgia is going to really struggle with a lot of the big boys is if they're going to decide, is the number really important, the 105? Of course it is, because you're going to have to change the way you practice if you get below that, maybe even where it is right now with 105. But I think the number, when you're looking at who they're going to bring in, is Georgia probably is going to try to have about 50 to 60 at the most players that are going to get a significant wage in terms of salary sliding. And then maybe there's a premium maybe for the first 30, 35 of those. But after that, I think is very interesting, where you're going to see them taking a lot of guys, Brandon. We've said on Before the Hedges for a couple of weeks now, you see Georgia taking guys in-state early that are of the 3-star variety, because it's just too good not to take. That's like a 3 or 4 foot putt in terms of how good of a fit that is. In-state, talented, can play for Georgia down the line, won't cost a lot. I think that's what Georgia's trying to look for with its roster builds going forward.
All right, let's talk a little bit of traditional recruiting for a moment. One of the things we haven't really done enough is react to the fact that Georgia did add a commitment on G-Day. Keelan Jones from Sprayberry does make his pledge to Georgia. So give me a little, and kind of the overarching theme of kind of what's coming up next for this 2026 class, give me a little bit on Jones here first. I have seen him play. I liked him. But tell me more about what Georgia adds here when it comes to Keelan Jones.
Georgia legacy. His mom went to Georgia, Brandon. I like it because Keelan, for several reasons. Keelan, Brandon, you may remember from calling that game, he was in a secondary with Jordan Edmonds, the 5-star corner, number 1 corner in the country, going to Alabama. Mark Manfred was also the other corner, and he's already signed with Missouri in the 2025 class. And then he was a first-year starter, Brandon. We don't see this a lot, Brandon. This deserved a oh my from me, or like a little eyebrow raising, because Brandon, he didn't get his first offer, period, until January the 8th of this year, and that was Arizona State. Georgia quickly came. And then after that, man, it was the floodgates. He had 30 offers by the time he was set to decide. You'd love to see young men like this. He's grown up all his life. Everybody was saying he was going to go to Georgia, mom, grandma. The other thing about him is he's very intelligent. He's one of those guys that doesn't need to be bothered with his phone when it's time to work and time to learn. He sits in the front row at all the meetings. But the other thing, Brandon, and we don't see this as much anymore, is he came up at Sprayberry High School. He was a Sprayberry High School football player in kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, and now he's on his way to Georgia, man. That's just kind of a lot of feel goods there. Georgia sees him as a safety. He's about 6 feet, about 190, likes to smack people, Brandon.
Love that.
I just like the sound of that.
Yeah, you love that. Of course, a lot of folks are also going to wonder, you mentioned Jordan Edmonds a little earlier. Does this do anything to maybe get Georgia back in on Edmonds, who's obviously recently made a commitment to Alabama?
Brandon, we need to bring in, you've got all the toys in your producer's tail box, but we need to bring a ship of maybe the Goonies ship sailing away at the end of that movie, because I think the Jordan Edmonds ship has sailed, man. Georgia tried to get him to hold on, but he was always Alabama for the longest time.
So do this, because we are going to be going on our DawgNation cruise next week, which I think you're as excited about as I am. Give me kind of a sort of an overarching view. I know we got Jared Curtis coming up on Cinco de Mayo. You're going to have a very busy stretch in kind of the early summer with these official visits. But what's on the immediate horizon when it comes to Georgia and its 2026 recruiting class?
So, Brent, I think there's probably 5 dominoes. It could probably make a good story to write, but there's 5 dominoes, I think, that will fall, that will eventually kind of basically map out or frame Georgia's 2026 recruiting class. And a couple of them are set to fall, Brandon. I know you follow this stuff very closely, but I believe this is the first time on your air, on your show, that we've talked about Jackson Cantwell. Cantwell, Brandon, he hasn't visited Georgia in a long time, since last season. And the thinking there was Georgia was always, they were the leader in the clubhouse. They were going to get into the playoff, kind of like Justin Rose, right? But now he makes a tweet about 2 weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago, and says, well, I'm a lot closer than I thought I was to the end of this thing. He names April the 30th, Brandon, as his commitment date, and he's also taking his official to Oregon right before that. We also know Mr. Cantwell, who I feel at one time, maybe if this was a couple of years ago, would already be committed to Georgia. He also visited Miami for an extended stay. So you've got 2 teams right there, Brandon, that are going to be heavy on the NIL spend. And you've also got our long-standing corollary to follow the visits. So for Georgia to have to wade through all that and get past, haven't visited recently, and get past other kind of extreme teams in terms of NIL spend, especially on the offensive line. And it also doesn't really seem really good for the good guys. And I mean, that's the folks that follow your program, that follow our programs and our site. I don't know if Georgia's going to win this one anymore, Brandon, when there was a time when I thought they did. So the domino of Jackson Cantwell would be one. And then you have on May the 2nd, another one, Malcolm Gaston. While he's not going to be a program shaping guy, he's going to make his decision. He's out of North Augusta in South Carolina. Georgia has been his longtime leader. And then we want to talk about overarching. Then you have Jared Curtis, Brandon. I feel like we've said before, you're not going to be able to pay for all these 5 stars or bring in all these 5 stars, no matter how tricky you try to do it before the July deadline with the House settlement to try and front load a lot of contracts. Well, bad news for Jackson Cantwell might mean good news for Jared Curtis. Brandon, the Dogs are still really in that thing, man. Most of the people I talk to, most of the people I listen to say Georgia somehow is in a good spot with Jared Curtis. And I scratch my head on that, because I wonder, how in the world are they going to do that? Is it going to take some complicated, layered math to find the money to outbid Oregon, I believe, or to at least have a healthy, strong, competitive bid against Oregon? And then you talk about, Mark Bowman, a guy that just visited Georgia this past weekend. Brendan, that went very well. So as we've long stated in a lot of times, even with myself and Kaylee Mansell on Before the Hedges, you see Mark Bowman right there. It's almost a numbers game. The more you spend on Curtis, the less you have for a Mark Bowman, a Jackson Cantwell, a Caden Prothrow, a Tyler Atkinson. And I think that's what's happening right now. The Curtis domino and the Cantwell domino, Brandon, those are going to be the two of the 5 biggest storylines for Georgia's 2026 recruiting. And we always say Georgia has figured it out at least a little bit with the Jared Curtis situation, because Brandon, if Curtis doesn't work out, if there's a late surge or there's a flurry of Nike money or whatever you want to call it on the Curtis side, I think Georgia is positioning itself very well for, I think they can win in either case in this class if they wind up with the Texan, the talented Texan, Bo Bentley or Jared Curtis. And then maybe if you end up with Bo Bentley, then you have a little bit more cash, maybe 30-40% more cash to go after some more of these prized assets in the class of 2026. It's getting really fascinating at some points, Brandon.
Fascinating stuff, Jeff. Looking forward to seeing you on board Utopia of the Seas next week. We'll also see you next week here on this program as part of our DawgNation Roundtable. That's going to be a lot of fun. That will be airing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. So I can't wait for that. Jeff, thank you for your time. Happy Easter to you and yours. I believe you've also got some prom stuff going on this weekend too, which is a really fun thing. So enjoy all of that. We will see you in Port Canaveral, getting ready for a Utopia of the Seas, and of course back here again on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger very soon as well.
Happy Easter, everybody. Brandon, I look forward to seeing you down in Florida, man.
Looking forward to it.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
One thing that Jeff is right about, we really have not talked enough about Jackson Cantwell. And, I mean, obviously, who wouldn't like him as a player? Of course we do. But I guess I've sort of had Cantwell in sort of a similar category of what we maybe would have had, like, say, David Sanders a year ago, where I just have not really had any kind of, like, strong suspicion. Boy, Cantwell's coming to Georgia. Now, I'd love to be wrong about that. And if that ends up being something I'm wrong about, then we will have made a mistake by not, doing more to preview that announcement. I just haven't quite gotten the, oh my gosh, here it comes vibes when it comes to that. But we'll see if that's the case. Pretty interesting update there from Jeff Sentell. And, allocation of funds is obviously a big part of all the discussion when it comes to what you do with your recruiting class right now. And Georgia's certainly deep in the midst of that. And the good news is that while, hey, maybe you don't get Cantwell or maybe you don't get whoever else, there is certainly a long list of potential names that gives Georgia an opportunity to once again have an elite class here in 2026. Now, speaking of Royal Caribbean, which I mentioned with Jeff, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And I'll say this, I'm so proud of the fact that we've been able to do our DawgNation cruise with Royal Caribbean this year on Utopia of the Seas for so many years. I love the community that's fostered. I've always kind of jokingly said, it's sort of like our DawgNation summer camp where, honestly, some of the folks we see here, I only see in person just this particular time. Maybe they'll get a chance to come to one of our DawgNation invasions or something like that. But this is sort of that special time to see these people. And honestly, I think of them as special people, big part of our life here because of this, almost week that we get to spend with them. And I'd love to have this experience with you at some point in time soon. But when I think about, and we're going to celebrate our 10th anniversary this year with DawgNation, when I think about what has made us special, it's events like our DawgNation cruise that are really a part of that. Just the just the time to be together, the time to enjoy each other's company. It's just such a wonderful experience. I'm really so proud to be a part of it. And I would love for you to be able to have that same experience. Obviously, so thankful for Jessica Slater, a wonderful travel advisor, kind of helps us put all of this together. And, if you can't be on our DawgNation cruise this year, you need to reach out to Jessica. You need to get a DawgNation, your own sort of DawgNation style cruise going at some point in time. 770-718-9147. 770-718-9147. That's Jessica's phone number. You can get with her on that. And as we're talking here, you see all the look back to so many fun things, so many really, just so many great specially themed DawgNation events, so much fun. It's just an unbelievable experience. All that culminating on kind of the final day with the trip to Perfect Day Coco Cay, just the awesome experience on board our draft party that night. It's just going to be an amazing time. I can't wait for all of that. Just incredible stuff. Some special guests will join us for like our, some of our video, via the magic of video. It's just an incredible experience. So can't wait to do it with you next week. Next year, we'd love to have as many of you join us as possible. Cannot wait for our DawgNation cruise. All right, so that is that. I mentioned earlier today on the show, CBSSports.com, ranking Noah Thomas as the Georgia MVP for the upcoming season. Maybe a little bit surprising. I was looking at this, though. When you look at the other teams mentioned here, many of them SEC teams, and the CBS projection for who the MVP will be, I think it's interesting to sort of say this. Like, based on what we think we know right now, like, how many players in college football not playing for Georgia next season? How many of them really scare you right now? Like when you look at the other MVPs projected to be that way for the other SEC teams, like, how many of these guys really scare you here right now? For instance, Arch Manning, one of the most important players, no doubt, in the SEC next season, starting quarterback for Texas. But Manning is not that different than Gunnar Stockton. Different last name, different level of fame, and frankly, projected to be a better player than Gunnar. I'm not saying that he's not, but he's also played very little. There's got to be a little bit of an unknown, an uncertainty around the Texas situation. You'll play him in November. Are you scared of Arch Manning right now? Now, he may turn out to be great, but are you scared of him right now? I would suggest you probably shouldn't be. Think about a team in Miami that CBS has ranked very high. They got Carson Beck, of course, the MVP. And I'm not picking on Beck. We've long since moved on from Carson Beck. But if Beck represents the sort of big dollar free agent acquisition, you scared of Carson Beck for if you were to see him in the playoff, if you had to do something like that? You scared of him? I would suggest you probably shouldn't be. Ohio State's got Jeremiah Smith. Are you scared of him? If you played him, you better believe that Jeremiah Smith is the sort of example of what I'm talking about that there's not that much of. Like J.J. Smith is an unbelievable player and the kind of guy you got to be aware of at all times. As Fran Brown said yesterday, worth millions of dollars to his team. But when you look at how valuable he is and how dangerous he is and contrast that to other teams, I just don't know how many other obvious players like that exist. Like Oregon, after having Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix in recent years, they're now going to shift to an inexperienced quarterback. They're going to have Dante Moore. And Moore may go on to be one of the best players in the sport. Certainly there's a very good chance that he will be. But once again, are you scared of that? I just think it's interesting to know that in the SEC alone, when you kind of look at the sort of top end projected players, like who's got true MVP level players, like who's got true household names, whether Jeremiah Smith is for Ohio State. How many teams in the SEC really have that for 2025? I would suggest the one team that definitely has that happens to be one of the teams that Georgia doesn't play. Like South Carolina's got a proven Lenora Sellers at quarterback and a proven Dylan Stewart at the edge rushing spot. Maybe the best offensive and maybe the best defensive player, maybe in the SEC. But in the regular season, Georgia doesn't have to play them. That you could look at Georgia and you may say, boy, who's the MVP here? Who's the player that's going to step up? Who are, as I like to kind of sometimes point out, who are the sort of first-team all-SEC type guys? And when you look at the Georgia roster, it's not necessarily obvious who those guys will be, but there's also a level of mystery surrounding the other names in this league, too, not just at Georgia. Maybe something to keep in mind. All right, a couple of other stories real quick, both these involving quarterbacks. We mentioned yesterday that the South Alabama quarterback could be going to UNC. That's now official. His name is Gio Lopez, very good group of 5 level player, and he's going to be Bill Belichick's quarterback at North Carolina. Interesting that North Carolina seemingly never really got involved in the Nico Iamaleava situation after Nico left Tennessee. Jeff also mentioned Belichick when he was on the show a minute ago. There was an interesting story from John Talty, who also writes for CBS Sports. We've referenced that website a few times today. Talty, writing for CBS Sports, reporting that right now, Bill Belichick and his Mike Lombardi, his GM there at North Carolina, at least reportedly, they're not throwing around a lot of big dollars in the NIL market right now. They're trying to, I guess the phrase is lowball. That may be overstating things a bit, but it sounds like right now that UNC is sort of interested in the caliber of player they feel like they might be able to lowball and get. So if you ask the question, well, if Bo Atkinson's so good, how come he's leaving North Carolina? Based on the reporting from Talty, who didn't mention Atkinson by name, but based on the reporting from Talty, it may be that North Carolina just didn't offer him as much. That a program like Georgia or maybe Ohio State or maybe South Carolina, one of these programs is just willing to offer him more than North Carolina wants to. That North Carolina is trying to be, a little bit lowballing with some of its offers right now. And so they'll take the South Alabama quarterback and feel like he can be okay as opposed to a more high-profile name. Another quarterback to mention here, Steve Angeli. Looks like Carr is going to win the Notre Dame the quarterback job. Their spring game was on TV a couple weeks ago. Everybody seems to think he's sort of the guy there. When you see the writing on the wall, oftentimes you leave. Angeli is leaving Notre Dame. We don't know where he's landing, and I certainly won't predict it's going to be Tennessee, but I will say this, that one of the things we need to hear eventually is who Tennessee is bringing in. And if it is an Angeli, that's not a starter-level player for Tennessee right now. You would probably be led to believe that whether it be Merklinger or McIntyre, that one of those guys more likely to win the Tennessee starting quarterback job. But, one of the things that's likely to break while we're gone on the Dog Nation cruise next week, and it may happen this weekend, is Tennessee will figure out which new quarterback it wants to add to its roster. And very likely this could be a quarterback that's not currently in the transfer portal. And we'll judge for ourselves. Okay, well, did they bring in kind of a ready-made starter? Look, say what you want about, Josh Heupel and his offense and, whatever's been said about that lately. But this is an offense that's had some success. And, Heupel, I think, believes in his own ability here. I don't think they're going to panic and make some big promise to some guy unless it's just an obvious fit for them. I don't know they're necessarily looking to bring in a starter-level quarterback. They may be okay with Merklinger. They may be okay with McIntyre. I think some people think that McIntyre may be a little farther along right now. I can't pretend to know that. I'm not in Knoxville. But who Tennessee adds as its next quarterback? Is it a player like an Angeli who lost his quarterback competition or believes he's going to lose his quarterback competition? Or is it someone who has a little bit more of a likelihood to be a possible starter? We will watch that now that Nico is at UCLA, and we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, speaking of quarterbacks, I want to talk about a Georgia quarterback here in a moment. Before I get to that, let me also give a shout out to our friends at the UGA bookstore. I told you yesterday I was going to try to go to the UGA bookstore, and I did. I went to Athens yesterday, had a little shopping experience, a lot of fun. I wanted to kind of get stocked up and look sharp for the Dog Nation cruise, so I don't always get a chance to do that a lot, but I was out there yesterday enjoying all of that. It was a great experience, and frankly, Athens was just gorgeous yesterday. Just the weather was nice. Everybody was out and about. You had a lot of folks getting ready for graduation. It's kind of cool. I just don't get to go into Athens as much as sometimes I'd like. When you are there, you just feel the great vibe around the university community. It was a lot of fun yesterday. So it's honestly worth a trip for you to Athens. If you go, like that area around Sanford Stadium where like the West End Zone is, you can go get your picture taken right there. It's open for you to be able to see. And also right next to Sanford Stadium across from the Tate Student Center is the UGA bookstore. If you want to get all the best Georgia gear for your own vacations coming up or just, the upcoming fall, never too soon to start thinking about that, you can do all your shopping. Tommy Bahama, Vineyard Vines, Southern Tide, Peter Millar, obviously the Nike stuff, all right there at the UGA bookstore. And as someone who's kind of always lived in the Atlanta area for most of my life, one of the things that's different about shopping at the UGA bookstore compared to some of the places you might see here in the Atlanta area where we do our show from every day, they got the stuff for the other sports. You want Diamond Dog shirts, you want softball, you want gymnastics. Like they've got the gear that supports the other non-football teams too, which is kind of one of those things you don't really find at any of the locations around the shopping experiences here around the Atlanta area. You kind of got to be at the UGA bookstore to get something like that. So go check them out today or shop online, UGAbookstore.com. Our friends at the UGA bookstore, it was great to be with them for G-Day, and we'll look forward to seeing them again this upcoming fall. Now, with that said, let's transition to this Long Finnish time on our show, presented by the Finnish Long Drink. And I wanted to spend a moment before our show closed out, before our week closed out, kind of focusing in on Ryan Puglisi here for a moment. We just talked about, transfers out from programs, Nico, drama. And listen, I'm not here to tell you that Georgia's immune to that, and I'm not here to tell you that Kirby Smart's got the perfect formula to make sure that none of that kind of stuff ever happens here. Some of this is just probably good luck. But when you do have some good luck, you need to appreciate it. And I do think that Georgia has good fortune shining on it right now, that there is very little in the way of quarterback drama here. Gunnar Stockton seems likely to be this Georgia starting quarterback. There's reason to believe that he can succeed. Ryan Puglisi, I think, seems somewhat comfortable in the backup role right now, certainly more comfortable than he was a year ago, with the potential to grow into something better. And honestly, I think there's a lot to like here. Now, that doesn't mean that Georgia may not still like to add a little bit of a additional quarterback of some kind into the mix. But if it does, my belief is that Gunnar Stockton will still be the starter, and in all likelihood, Ryan Puglisi will still be the backup quarterback, if I had to guess. That there's just sort of a lot to like with this quarterback situation for Georgia right now, even if there are still some unknowns attached to it. So with that in mind, to kind of close out our week here, let me let you hear Kirby Smart from last Saturday, kind of focusing in on what he likes about Puglisi, what he saw from Ryan here this spring, and why the attitude of these Georgia quarterbacks right now is sort of exactly what you would want it to be. This is Kirby Smart.
Ryan's done a good job. Ryan continues to get better. It's his first spring. I mean, he hadn't got a chance to compete and do much. He has growth. He's still probably a little bit behind Gunnar in terms of the knowledge of the offense, but he's catching up in regards to that, right? He's getting experience, knowing when to pull it down and run it, when to throw it away, just game management decisions. He's not going to do anything but get better, and they're both great kids who have a great relationship with each other, and we're very lucky to have two guys that care so much about Georgia, and they're not worried about the perception or whatever you're going to write coming out of the scrimmage of your view of them. They don't care. They care about the team, and that's what I care about.
So I used the word lucky a minute ago. Kirby Smart used that too, and what I think that means is that, listen, a lot of coaches are probably pretty happy that Josh Heupel stood up for himself in the Nico situation, but a lot of other coaches, I think, are also probably looking at that and saying, boy, I'm glad that's not me this time, with the fear that maybe that could be me in the future. Like, as long as chaos is allowed to be sort of the order of the day in college football, that no program is going to be immune to it. But for right now, Georgia's got a pretty drama-free experience going on at quarterback, and that's, say, maybe even a change for the better compared to last year, that you feel pretty good about that. You can't guarantee how either of these guys will play, Gunnar, the presumed starter, Puglisi when he gets his opportunity, but the fact that they both seem so bought into the program here right now, I think you take that as a very good thing. And that is our Long Finish here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by the Finnish Long Drink. Now, many of you getting ready for a great weekend coming up. You're hanging out with family and friends, you're enjoying some gorgeous weather. This time of year, when I have a chance to be outside, one of the things I love to enjoy is the Finnish Long Drink, whether it's the traditional blue can, the grapefruit flavor, the gin kick, the long drink cranberry, the peach-flavored version, the peach date for a limited time here, the long drink zero, that's no carbs, no sugar. You love that. Long drink strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. There is a long drink variety for you. So if you've never tried it before, or if you would like to try some again as we kind of head towards this really great time of year, go to thelongdrink.com. Put in your zip code. You can figure out where you can get some close to you today. You can also learn the story about how this starts off in Finland back in the 1950s, summer games there in Helsinki, ends up in America, then it makes its way to Georgia, then it kind of joins up with us at DawgNation, and in this really cool category of beverage, the ready-to-drink cocktail, really no better taste, no better flavor in that category than our friends at the Finnish Long Drink. Everybody who tries it raves about it. We're proud about it too. So enjoy yourself some Finnish Long Drink here today. All right, so next week, DawgNation Roundtables, Monday through Thursday, in this space as a part of DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. And then on Friday, 1 week from today, Connor Riley will be live reacting to the NFL draft. And, of course, live throughout the week while we're on the DawgNation cruise when transfer portal stuff happens, no matter what that portal stuff is. We'll be watching it closely on video as needed. Let's also give you a couple of golden shoes here today, starting with our buddy Stephen Wainwright. And one of the things I am not good at is I'm not always as good of a self-promoter as I should be. It's an important part of the job. I don't think it's shameless to promote yourself. That's how people find you. I'm not always as good about that as I should be. Thankfully, some of you are kind enough to do it for me. Stephen, putting on X. Another great show from Brandon Adams, the best place to get all your UGA news. Stephen, that's incredibly kind. We're going to give you a golden shoe for that. I do truly appreciate that. It means the world to me. Thank you very much. Another golden shoe going out to our buddy, the Real Georgia on Tap, who was talking about there was a podcast raising money for charity, and one of the donors did so in honor of the fact that it's now been more than 1,600 days since Florida has beaten Georgia. We love that as an idea, especially when it raises money for a good cause. We'll give our buddy the real Georgia on tap, who I believe may have lost his X account. So I think that's why he's now the real Georgia on tap. Either way, good stuff from him on that. We'll give golden shoes there for that too. And by the way, speaking of that number that keeps on climbing, about 1,623 days. To get to Port Canaveral, you got to drive right past Gainesville. The good news is it's easy to get there. All you got to do is just keep on going till you smell it, because there's obviously a stench. You're there when you get there. That stench unmistakable. But when we drive by this weekend, we'll be saying 1,623 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. We love that. Gator hater updater. Wish you could be on the Dog Nation cruise with us. I'll see you next Monday. But next week, you're going to love these Dog Nation Roundtable shows. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll see you back here very soon. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We will look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Now, speaking of some roundtable shows, we got to record those here today. So that means we can't really do much in the way of comments, but we're going to try to have some good times. So let me get a couple of comments here, and then we'll see what's on everybody's mind. Garrison Tucker says, if you could only go to one home game in 2025, what game are you picking? He says, deciding which one to come to from Oklahoma City. That is a very tough question because this year's home slate is outstanding. I think for me, it would probably be Alabama. If I had to choose between Alabama and Texas, I believe I would choose the Alabama game. It's earlier in the season, for instance. Some people might say, yeah, here's a nice look at the Georgia schedule. Some people might say if weather is a factor for you, sometimes it's more pleasant in November than it is in September. But, man, that Georgia-Alabama game is going to be such a scene setter and a tone setter for the rest of the season. If you're forcing me to only pick one, I believe that's the one that I would pick. But I would say Georgia – I would say that Alabama and Texas are likely to be of essentially equal importance. Now, the Ole Miss game on October 18th is also a revenge game, but I think Alabama and Texas are probably the two most important, and I believe I would probably choose the Alabama over that. UGA Marine says he's coming to the Mississippi State game this year. So there you go on that. That's in Starkville on November the 8th. We'll be there too, Marine, so make sure you come by and say hello to us. Savannah Bryan, by the way, coming in here for his he is taking a bow right now because he did project the Braves to lose 100 games. He says, I was wrong. They're on track right now to lose 117 games. So, yeah, listen, right now, Brian, you're looking a lot smarter than me. I don't mind telling you that. Shane Holiday says, I'm heading down to Cocoa Beach tomorrow, ready to see the Dog Nation crew on Monday. Shane, I can't wait to see you too. That's going to be awesome. Cocoa Beach, obviously the beach, it's kind of right there next to Port Canaveral. I would say it's really fun to sail out of Port Canaveral because as you leave the port, you eventually kind of, especially if you're on the starboard side of the ship, you sort of see, down the beach, Cocoa Beach, always a lot of fun. I love that. Shane, I can't wait for it. What a great thing that's going to be. Man, it's exciting. Really, really looking forward to being with all of you for that. Let's get to YouTube here for a moment. We'll see how people are doing there. On YouTube, Spencer Clark says the Georgia Tech game is going to be electric. Obviously, this year in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, very different vibe for that. And look, I would say the Tech has improved enough, and they've certainly been enough of a thorn in Georgia's side lately, that, last year, Clemson was the big non-conference game. This year, Georgia Tech is the big non-conference game. Game's in the same spot, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It just happens to be at the end of the year. And by then, who knows? Maybe Tech hasn't had that kind of season. But honestly, even if they haven't had a very good season, the thing about Brent Key is, he usually plays pretty well against the good teams and oftentimes embarrasses himself against lesser competition. So even if the Tech record's not very good, it's probably still at least the last 2 years would lead you to believe, maybe a tough game for Georgia. So I think that there's actually a pretty good vibe for the Georgia Tech game this year. Who knows how many years that lasts in the future? Maybe not very many. But for right now, that is certainly the case. Jonathan Aaron mentioning the situation at Florida State yesterday, and yeah, that's obviously a serious situation in our world. You know, we don't always talk about every single thing that goes on. I just decided in light of, you know, kind of the vibe of today going into a holiday weekend, and decided not to mention that, but obviously in my own life, very well aware of the situation at Florida State and very well aware of how serious and scary that is. JC mentioned the Florida game, by the way, for Georgia with DJ Lagway. There's a chance that Florida is improved. I think of the Georgia rivals, Auburn is the most likely to be improved. But there's a chance that Florida is also improved. I think that's the case. Spencer Clark says the Tech game just as big as Texas or Alabama because it could have college football playoff implications. Yeah. I mean, a year ago, it's really weird. Like, I hope people understand what I'm saying when I say this. So I was really fascinated about what was going to happen for the Georgia Tech game when it sort of seemed like that Georgia did have to win the game to make the college football playoff. Like, I was really excited about that. Not to say that I wasn't excited. This is the part that gets confusing. That's not to say that I wasn't excited about Georgia going to the SEC championship and having a chance to win that. But once we learned that Georgia was going to go to Atlanta for the title game, Georgia's playoff hopes would be determined by what happened in the SEC championship game. That all of a sudden, the Tech game kind of became what it has sort of been for most of our lifetimes, which is sort of meaningless for Georgia's postseason expectations. And I'm not using that as an excuse for why the game was close. But I was really excited about, hey, it'll be interesting to see Georgia play Tech for kind of all the marbles. Would have been very interesting to see that. Ultimately, that's not what we saw. Maybe this year that will be more the situation. It certainly could be. Taylor Russell asking about DJ Lagway's health. There have been some online stuff about that. I honestly don't know what's real and what's not. In this particular case, there are, I guess, some people kind of a little concerned about his injury recovery, but I honestly don't know how substantial that really is. Let us see what else. Foster Moss says Florida's a basketball school now. Yeah, they love that now. They love that. Let's see what else. Dean Alley on the subject of the Syracuse quarterback now that Kyle McCord's leaving. He put up huge numbers there, man. McCord, it's one of the real stories of last year that probably hasn't gotten enough attention. Everybody knows that Fran Brown had a very successful year at Syracuse, but getting way more out of Kyle McCord than McCord seemingly seemed capable of doing going back to his time at Ohio State. A really fascinating story. Really fascinating story. And now, I mean, some of y'all follow the draft a lot closer than I do, but there are a lot of people who think that McCord has a chance to be a well-received draft pick, right? Let's see what else. They're talking about robots in here. RKD also mentioned the Bo Atkinson visit. I'd love to have him come here. I really would. I'd love to have him come here. Jonathan Aaron says, what in your mind was more thrilling, overtime versus Tech or the field goal versus Ohio State? Listen, for me, it's Ohio State by a long shot. That's one of the most thrilling moments I've been lucky enough to be a part of. Did not want to lose to Ohio State in Atlanta. Unbelievable comeback. And I tell you, the moment for me in that game that I'll always remember is the Arian Smith touchdown. The long, deep route touchdown, kind of beating Ohio State at its own game. Georgia was down big when that happened, setting the stage for everything else that happened after that. What a game, man. What a game. JC also mentioned the Diamond Dogs. They do lose last night. This was one of those weird series. Most SEC series are Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Diamond Dogs did lose last night. I wish we had more time to talk about it. It is hard to get it all in, y'all. It is hard to get it all in because I don't think we had any fluff today. Hopefully we never do. But we did transfer stuff, a little bit on Noah Thomas, and then some recruiting stuff. And that's an hour right there. I mean, it's just hard to get it all in. Diamond Dogs did lose at Vandy last night, though. As far as the rankings goes, it is Texas, I believe, that's the number one team right now in the country. But Georgia's right up there at the top. Texas is now number one because Georgia won the series last week against Arkansas. That's kind of what you're, I think, probably thinking there on that. All right. Let me get a couple of Facebook comments, and then we're going to have to move into the weekend. All right. On Facebook. Let's see what else. Kent Holcomb agrees that Alabama would be the game to go to. I think that's probably right. He says it's more of an older traditional series for Georgia as opposed to sort of the new thing against Texas. Yeah, I would say that Kent. That was some of my thinking on that probably too. Ulysses Dunnings and Jacob O'Neill critical for me for going to Facebook last. I think some of that's because the other day I got signed out of Facebook on my laptop, and I just have never signed back in. But now I'm also signed out of DawgNation.com somehow too. So when I come back, I've got a lot of signing in to do. Scott Gentry says, what underdog player do you see surprising us this year? That's interesting because at Georgia, it's sort of hard to find a player that really classifies as, I guess, sort of a true underdog. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this counts, but like, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but like Nnamdi Ogbokwo at the defensive line spot, I could see him maybe factoring into the rotation a little bit more. If Xavier McLeod would count in this discussion, I could see him factoring into the defensive line rotation a little bit more. I could see those things happening. Yeah, Jacob O'Neill kind of give me a hard time for too many YouTube comments. Fair enough. Fair enough, indeed. Also, a little talk here about the sad situation at Florida State. Yeah, just, I mean, incredibly tragic. And what's really scary now is, there's a lot of video out there of that. And I don't know, it comes into your feed. Sometimes it's sort of hard not to watch it. It's almost like a reflexive type thing. Man, so scary, so scary, so scary. Keith Fold says, have a great time on the cruise next week. Wish we were going. Yeah, Keith, if I had my wish, I could take everybody with us. We'd just, we'd take 2 ships worth, 3 ships worth, or I guess even more ships than that to get everybody. But yeah, I mean, I'd love nothing more than to bring everybody with us and just have that experience. But I am really thankful for it. And for me, it's more than just a cruise. It's a chance to kind of create some community around Dawg Nation, and I just love that. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to do to make the event fun. And much the same way we've had, many of the same sponsors for like 10 years, we'll have a lot of people who, kind of come back year after year for our Dawg Nation cruise, which means we must be doing something right. So I'm really thrilled about that. And I really do, I know this sounds corny, but I do genuinely really like Royal Caribbean. And I do genuinely believe that people benefit from a good vacation, right? And listen, different people have different access to vacations at different times in their life, both in terms of discretionary income and just free time. Not every season of life provides equal access to taking a vacation. I live in the real world. I completely understand that. But it is not a meaningless frivolity. It is an important part of reconnecting with the people in your life that you travel with, or just sort of unplugging and recharging to be fresher and the better version of yourself once you come back. I think there's something really restorative about travel. I'm a very big believer in it. Very big believer in it. All right, let us see what else. We're going to get ready to go here in a minute. Philip Jordan Wells shouting out the Easter ham. Easter ham, big part of that. We'll have some Easter ham. My mom was telling me this week. She's got the stuff going. Now, we're doing all of our Easter stuff on Saturday. There's even a rumor that the Easter Bunny may come on Saturday, which is shocking. But there's even some rumor on that just because on Sunday we are traveling. So, yeah, we're going to church tonight and Easter with family on Saturday. hitting the road on Sunday. So that's sort of the story there on that. And Jacob O'Neill says he was just messing with you. I totally know that. Listen, I need y'all to give me a hard time. That's an important part of my plan to sort of stay humble and hungry. All right, anything else? JC said he saw where the cheapest tickets for Bama right now are $500 each on the secondary market. Yeah, it's getting out of control, man. And, I did not do much on the show on this week. I just didn't really want to. But, I mean, I had some of y'all reach out to me, not super happy that Kirby Smart was like, we're going to do what's right for our team and not what benefits Athens. And like I said, I just didn't want to make a thing out of that. I just didn't want to. But what some of you said was, there was a time in which, Georgia really needed its fan base, but maybe now when tickets to get into the stadium are $500, the sort of fan that was encouraged to come to G-Day circa 2016, maybe there isn't quite as much of a need for that fan anymore. And listen, there are some Georgia fans that are wandering the wilderness. They really are. And I don't know what you do about that. But we're not going to make a huge deal about it necessarily. But when what used to be a fun conversation of, which home game do you want to come to, becomes a conversation of, hey, what game can I afford to go to? And I'm right there with you on any of that. When my wife and kids go to the game, we buy those tickets always. And when you're starting talking about $500 per ticket, if that's what it is, and I'm not surprised to hear that, for family of 4 to go to the game, that's, as you're capable of doing the math, $2,000. What in the world? What in the world? I mean, and listen, in some respects, it's a good problem to have because it just means that Georgia's really good. But boy, there are a lot of Georgia fans kind of sort of trying to figure out how they fit into this world moving forward. And I do get that. All right, let's see what else. All right, anything before we go? Garrison Tucker with a very heartfelt Easter message. I appreciate that. Randy Hall mentioned Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. Yeah, really good player. Really good player. Listen, I think that South Carolina is turning into a really good program. They're recruiting well for 2026. They're, I think, a factor here for some of the big transfers. Doing it kind of his own way, a little different than some other coaches in the SEC. I think Shane Beamer's doing some really strong stuff right now. UGA Marine wishes us well as we go on the cruise. Appreciate that, Marine. Thank you very much. Jay Schapp says, I'm not paying to get a no Georgia game. I don't have to pay for myself. I'm a distinguished member of the Coastal Elite Broadcast Media, as you well know. But when my family goes, listen, they are not falling all over themselves to give me free tickets for my family. I can promise you that. Wife, kids, we buy tickets all the time. All the time we buy tickets. And, I'm just telling you right now, I have looked my daughter doesn't really care. I have looked my son in the eye and told him, I'm sorry, we can't afford to go to this game. I have. I have had to look my son in the eye and say, I know you want to go to so-and-so game. Right now we can't afford it. So for the people who are out there, now we've also been lucky enough that there are some games we have, but I'm not trying to say that, we've been lucky enough to go to some really good games too and take them to some really good games. But I have had that conversation with my, son about how expensive so-and-so tickets might be. So when y'all are dealing with that, I'm dealing with that too. I can promise you. Spencer Clark says, they've been talking about robots taking jobs. So I think my goal as a human is to be weird enough that robots can't really replicate that. And listen, maybe one day I'll be laughing at myself because maybe there'll be a robot sitting here doing this job. Somehow, some way, I'm not saying this makes what I do good, but I don't believe a robot could do this. I don't think so. In some respects, I do view AI as a little bit of a problem. But if you ever use one of these navigation apps to travel with, that's a version of AI. honestly, they get the directions just wrong enough, frequently enough, that I'm a little bit suspicious of AI really taking over the world. I'm a little suspicious of that. I'm a little suspicious of that. I don't know. Yeah, so we'll see. Randy Payne, speaking of our Dog Nation cruise, checking in from Tifton. We're going to be seeing Randy. If y'all have never met Randy, he's on our Dog Nation post-game show sometimes. Going to be in our Dog Nation cruise. You got to check that out. All right, let me do a couple of Facebooks, and then after that, we are truly getting off the air. All right, on Facebook. Keith Fold says, very thankful for our season tickets. We have them since 1973. Let's see what else. Ken Holcomb says you got to pay these NIL deals somehow. That's why the tickets are so expensive. Yeah. In some respects, I guess that's the case. Either way, we got to go for now. We'll see you next week. The roundtable show is going to be great. You're going to love those. Also, check out RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. They'll get you tuned back up to factory fresh specs. It's about to be warm. It is warm. It's going to be even warmer. So get your AC ready to go for all of that. Y'all, thank you so much for being a part of our RS Andrews Cool Down. Obviously, we'll be back doing this again a week from now. Wish you could be on the Dog Nation cruise. Very, very proud of events like this for our organization. So we'll come back. We'll tell you all about it if you're not able to be there. And we'll see you very soon, including next week, for Dog Nation Daily presented by Kroger. We will look forward